Hey everybody, it's Trags, and this week on Red Sox Beat, I welcome the outstanding Chad Jennings covering all things Red Sox for The Athletic. You can and should be following him on Twitter at Chad Jennings 22. That's all one word and both numbers together. Chad Jennings 22. How you doing, Chad?
I'm doing all right, Trags. How are you?
It's
funny. It's funny every time I think somebody brings up that Twitter handle. I know nothing about jersey numbers. I am like among my friends on the beat. I mean, I can't tell you the most famous uniform numbers in the history of sports. And I've been a sports nut since I was a kid. And for some reason so that's just my wife's favorite number. It really has no other connection to anything. I just went with 22.
I definitely am into uniform numbers, and I'm an NBA fan, grew up a Sixer fan. And my favorite player was not Dr. J. It wasn't Mo Cheeks, wasn't Moses Malone. It was Andrew Toney, the Raging Cajun, the Boston Strangler. Of course, Celtics fans remember him very, very well back in the day. But number 22 was my favorite number in high school, wore it when I played basketball, all because of Andrew Toney. And that is my little history lesson, my personal insight on who I was as a awkward high school athlete. Now we're on to the subject at hand, the 2021 Red Sox. There's so much, Chad, to break down here in this episode. I'm really glad I have you on because a lot of ways we can go. We'll go with the obvious, first of all, how the Red Sox are 55-36 at the All-Star break, but they go in stumbling a little bit, losers of 4 of 6 going into the break, and 2 of 3 at home at Fenway over the weekend to the Phillies, who were just, a middling team, a 44-44 team. Yeah. They looked a little flat over the weekend, no?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, they could have swept that series. The second game wound up being a blowout, but that was one bad inning. I mean, they could have and probably should have won all 3. And that seems they've done that this year, right? Doesn't it feel like they've kind of, that's been one of the reasons they've been kind of good is they've taken advantage of those moments. They've won at home. That felt like a series that in even a decent stretch that they would have taken at least 2 out of 3. And I really felt like they could have and maybe should have won all 3. But yeah, so they didn't end well. But they'll take it, right? I mean, they're in a much better position than they expected.
No question about that. I mean, I'm not looking to give tours here at all, but the Red Sox are an interesting team to me. And the team that comes to mind when I look at the first half of this Red Sox season are the 78 Red Sox, who played just lights out, built up that, epic 10.5 game lead over the New York Yankees, could not hold on at the end, actually lost the lead, came back in the final week to catch them, force the 1-game playoff at Fenway. We all know how that ended. But that team could mash with the best of them, really, I think, hit themselves out of a lot of nights when the pitching wasn't there. This Red Sox team, a little bit the same, although I think the pitching may be a little bit better. Certainly Nathan Eovaldi is having a terrific season. He's an all-star. And, I think when you take a look at this pitching rotation, it has its bright spots, but what sticks out to me is I don't think this pitching staff is built for the postseason. I don't think they have enough starters that you would throw out there in a postseason game and be confident. And I don't think their bullpen is near deep enough, even though it has been very good over the last month and a half.
Yeah, the pitching staff has been, it's been pretty good, but it for sure, I think, everything about it is kind of a maybe or an uncertainty, right? There's just something, there's some feeling about this team where, they don't have the ace. They did add, they've been able to go 1 through 5 with the rotation and everyone's kind of been solid. They don't have those games, somebody will have an off night or whatever, but they don't have a game every turn through the rotation where you go, oh, this one's going to be a tough one, but they're, they kind of, that's an uninspiring way to do it, right? I mean, to just never have that knockout punch. And even as you bring up the bullpen, it doesn't feel that deep, but they've pitched kind of deep. Barnes has been excellent. And then you look at, Ottavino and Taylor and Darwinson and Sawamura and Whitlock. Those guys have been good. It should feel like a deeper team. It should feel stronger than it, because it has been pretty strong. It just doesn't, you don't know how sustainable it is.
And Josh Taylor.
Oh yeah. I mean, he's been awesome. I mean, that run was incredible. But also that run came after, a brutal month of April, right? I mean, he's been terrible. And so I think that adds to it a little bit, where you're like, it's just guys we haven't necessarily seen do this enough to feel real comfortable right now.
To me, I don't think we should be relying a lot on Chris Sale. We expect him to be back, right? Late July, early August, right? I mean, he's going to be on track. He's already thrown rehab starts, correct?
Well, he's been throwing sim games and stuff. His first rehab start, I think, is this week. But yeah.
Oh, there you go. He's going to start throwing in rehab outings. Get him back, let's say, ironically, right around the trade deadline, let's say. And let's say he gives you 10 starts over the final 2 months of the season. Is that fair? Maybe 8 to 10.
Yeah, 8 to 10. Yeah.
Something like that. And, he's somebody that if he's on and he's giving you 5 to 6 innings every night, and they're 80% of what he was, I think that's the best you could hope for. Yeah.
Oh no. And I completely agree with you. I don't think that you can look at him and expect him to be, Cy Young, perennial Cy Young candidate, Chris Sale, but I think he could be. I think that's the biggest boost they're going to get in the rotation, right? I just don't see them going out and trying to find some.
Sure, sir.
I just don't think it's going to happen. So I think you're going to have to. They need Evaldi to keep pitching like this, which is maybe not the dominant ace type guy, but he's been very good. And you got to get Erod to figure something out and be more consistent, and then get some version of Sale. And if you can run those 3 guys in the playoffs, then now you're maybe talking about something. You still don't have that guy you want, right? You still not going. You don't have you certainly don't have a DeGrom or something like that shutdown guy. But those 3 give, and all you're asking from them is 5 innings at a time. You can at least see how it could work.
I in the past, I would expect the Red Sox ownership to have made a big push and tried to get a guy like Max Scherzer, simply because if he is on the market and if he's available, and given the dynamic of what's going on in Washington now, that he may be completely off the market, because the Washington team may see an opportunity to say, let's just hold on to him, see what happens, right, and make a run in it's still a very mediocre National League Eastern Division. But if he were available, he is the kind of guy that in the past the Red Sox would go hard at. Now, I think, given how Chaim Bloom is constructing the farm system, constructing the organization, and with the blessings of John Henry and et al., I think you're going to see a different attack on what they're going to do at the trade deadline. No?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's going to be fascinating. I mean, I'm really curious just to see the way he plays this, because I do think that maybe, when you trade Mookie Betts, you're going to get this reputation quickly, but I think that I don't know that he's as anti build and try to win right now as it seems. I think he's probably willing to do that. And he has there's enough depth in the farm system now, and he's kind of facing probably a 40-man crunch this offseason. So he probably needs to make some sort of move and, give up some pieces and do try to sort of fortify things here. But yeah, I'm with you. I just don't see him right now thinking this is the time. I think that there may come a time when he's ready to do that. There may come a time when he feels like, okay, he even talked about the Betts trade when I talked to him in spring training, he talked about that the Dodgers were able to do the trade for Betts because they'd done these other things, and then they could make that sort of all-in trade. And so I do wonder if he's going to build to the point where he'll feel like he can make that kind of move.
That's an interesting observation.
Yes. And yeah, because I think that's clearly who he's modeling this after. He's trying to be the Dodgers. And so there may come a time, but I think that right now he has a vision for the way he wants this to work. And really the first half of this season has been a little bit of proof of concept, right? That he can have a long-term vision and still keep a contending, viable, good team on the field while still maintaining his priority of something more sustainable.
Speaking with Chad Jennings, doing an outstanding job covering the Red Sox for The Athletic. Be sure to check him out there and on his Twitter page. Chad Jennings, 22. I want to come back to that point about building the organization to a level where the Dodgers are now. I want to come back to that later when we talk the MLB draft. That's a little bit of a teaser, as we say in the business and in the podcasting streaming business. But for now, I want to go back, take a look at what you're working on right now, Chad, for the recap of the first half, some things that have surprised you one way or another, and what are some of the things that stick out the most in that feature that you are working on for the Athletic?
Yeah, just, kind of trying to think about why are they better than we thought? And I think it starts, I think, just with their star players have played like stars. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is a big JD Martinez coming back to be himself, Xander, Devers, even, Verdugo hasn't been as consistent, but just particularly those three guys in the middle, I mean, that's a big difference, right? And then when you add to that this felt like a team, as we've talked about, they don't have an ace. They came into the season without a closer, but they do have an all-star starting pitcher, and Barnes has been, so even though that felt like something they didn't have, right? That they didn't have really high-end pitching either in the rotation or in the bullpen, but they've gotten that. I mean, they have gotten high-end performances in both spots, and I think that's made a difference too. There's something to be said too for just, and I don't know if it's always hard to say like what impact does a manager have, what impact does clubhouse culture make, but a lot of come from behind wins, a lot of just, they have not played like a team that came off of a terrible season and were supposed to be bad. I mean, they've had this sort of, we're better belief kind of from the beginning. Maybe that comes from bringing in guys like Kike Hernandez and Hunter Renfroe, who were in the World Series last year. And there's some like sense of just, they know how to win, and they've done that. And I think I don't know how to quantify that. I can't say for sure that's made a difference, but it seems to have been there. Right. And I think last year's team they just were getting beat up so quickly, and the season was so short, and there was so much going on. They just never had anything.
Literally.
Literally no pitching. And so they just knew they were in trouble every night after night after night after night. But
and then it got,
these teams had something, man. They do. There is some, there's an energy to this team that's a little bit different.
There's a vibe, and I think Alex Cora is responsible for that for one reason. In the time that I was around Alex, covering the Red Sox on a daily basis up there, his accountability is second to none. He expects that of himself, his coaches, and certainly of his players. And with the accountability comes a confidence that if you're on the field for me, I know you're going to get the job done. I just have 100% confidence in you. He conveys that to you. And he's like, don't look in the dugout if there's a mistake. Just go about your business, move on to the next play, the next pitch, and show me that. And you're going to stay on the field.
Yeah, I think you're certainly right. And he does a good job too of, he's a smart analytics guy. He likes the numbers and those, but he has a good feel for the clubhouse too. And I think the ability to marry those two without leaning too far one way or the other, yeah. I do think that's been useful, and then, especially, there's some kind of veteran-y guys here who maybe he could, he can play both sides of it, right? He can sort of go with the young guys or with the older guys and kind of help. He bridges that gap well. And I think that does add to some of that attitude and adds to some of that sense of, we're down 2 or 3, and Cora's been telling these guys all the time that they're the most dangerous lineup in baseball, and they believe it. They go out and they hit. Even when they go through stretches where only 3 of them are hitting worth anything, they will believe we are the best, most dangerous lineup in baseball, and they go.
Well, what's interesting about that, Chad, is that the Red Sox don't have one hitter that you fear. They don't have 2. They have 3 legitimate guys that I think you fear at any point late in the game could kill you. And their guys have been what you would expect them to be, like you said earlier. A team like the Yankees are supposed to have 4 to 5 of those guys, and maybe one has really lived up to expectation this year. And that's the difference between a team like the Red Sox doing what they're doing and what the Yankees are doing. And I just think that really is something that sticks out to me, and one reason the Red Sox are where they are.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Yankees, again, some of it comes down to the guys who they needed to be big-time performers that the Red Sox have gotten. That's not to say they don't have holes. That's not to say that there aren't problems, weaknesses, but But when your number one starter, your closer, and your middle three hitters are all 5 all-stars, that's big, man. I think that's your top reliever, your top pitcher, and the 3 guys you need to hit, and that they've all performed at that level. That's 20% of the roster, right? That's performing at that level. That can lift a lot.
Tanner Houck, what is his deal? When can we see him pitching for the Red Sox?
Yeah, I think as early as Thursday. I mean, it could be, I think right after the break, they could bring him up to play one role or another. But it's, he's pitched okay down there. His last start wasn't that good in AAA, but he obviously was. I think they saw him as an important part of this team, whether he made the team or not. I mean, early on, during spring training, somebody brought up that the Rays years ago, when Chris Archer had this, he came up late in the year, pitched really well, and then didn't make the opening day roster. But he made like 20 starts for that team on a team where their 5-man rotation stayed relatively healthy, and he still got 20 starts. I think that was probably a plan for Tanner, was something like that, where he wasn't going to make the team, but he was going to be up enough to make a difference, and then he wound up getting hurt. So I think we're going to see him pitch quite a bit, because I think they know they've got some workload issues here. They've got to make sure don't kind of fall apart. So, whether that's him coming up to spot start, whether that's him coming up to be kind of a 3-inning guy out of the bullpen, I think there's a role for Tanner Houck in the second half, and we may see it play out sooner than later.
So I've had John Sadak, talented TV play-by-play announcer for the Cincinnati Reds for Valley Sports Ohio last week, and he had him on last week, and he has made the point time and time again. What's going to be fascinating to him, watching how managers manage their pitching rotations and innings in the second half of the season, coming off the 60-game COVID season of 2020. And to me, what you just said pretty much speaks to that, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, these guys have the Red Sox top 5 starters have made every start since mid-April.
Right.
That's remarkable. And we were talking about the reasons they've been better than we expected. That's a big part of it. I mean, health and durability and that's been a huge issue. But yeah, I mean, you do wonder how long can that go? I mean, I think they wanted to give these guys more of a break, and they just didn't have the AAA rotation to do it. I mean, their top 3 prospects down there all were hurt. And so now I think they're going to have to make up for it a little bit, and they can make up for it with Tanner Houck kind of right away. Garrett Whitlock has helped. That this kid's been as good as he has, gives you another option of a guy who can give you multiple innings. And then, you wait for Sale in a month or so. But I think you're right that it is going to be crucial for every team now to not let your pitchers blow out in the second half, and to do that, or at least to try to do that, to try to play it safe. I think they're going to need a guy like Houck to play one role or another, either to spot start with some regularity to give guys a break, or to just come up and know that you can shut a guy down at 75 pitches, and we've still got this kid to give us the next 2-3 innings.
Move on. And news over the weekend that Matt Barnes has signed to a 2-year extension at $18.75 million. Here's how I read this, Chad Jennings. Low-risk extension rewarding a player with whom they're very familiar and comfortable with at the back end of the bullpen. And I don't think, given how he's performed in the first half of the season, I think it's a nice little incentive for the second half.
Yeah, and I also would read Darwinson Hernandez is going to be cheap for both of those years. Josh Taylor's going to be cheap for those years. Garrett Whitlock's going to be cheap for those years. Sawamura is cheap again next year. They can afford to spend some money on one reliever, because that doesn't mean they're going to have to blow a ton of money on the bullpen, right? You can spend money on Barnes when you know you have some cheap arms ready to fill the next spots, because I don't know that I would have expected a relief pitcher to be Chaim Bloom's biggest investment to this point, right? I mean, relievers do seem to be the ones that are the most interchangeable, the least reliable. So the fact that he picked Barnes and decided to give him a deal, I mean, one, speaks to how good he's been, and speaks to that he got better this year, not because his stuff ticked up, but because his approach did. And that you could keep doing, right? If he got this much better, it's not like all of a sudden, oh, wow, his fastball's 4 miles per hour more, that's then I think maybe you'd worry. But no, he changed his mindset a little bit, and that's a repeatable thing. And so you'll trust him. But I do think the fact that that is the bullpen investment for the next 2-3 years, right? Then otherwise now you have these young arms ready to fill the other spots, and that makes it a little bit easier to put money there.
With the rigors of the Boston market. But what you pointed out, you also just said, last year and years prior to that, it seemed like he would pussyfoot around the strike zone a little bit and wait to really make his pitch later in counts. That's not been the case this year, and probably one of the reasons I think would be Alex Cora, right?
Yeah, and he's talked about that in spring training. I mean, Matt Bush and the analytics department just talked to him and said, and basically told him, I can't remember the exact number, but it was something like, based on these numbers, if you were to throw a first pitch fastball down the middle, you'll have a positive outcome like 90% of the time. You know, whether that's a foul ball or they take it for a strike or whatever. I mean, it just
right.
And I think that resonated with him because I did a couple of years ago when he had that first sort of breakout season, his first big one when his strikeout numbers went through the roof, and we did a story on why, like what made him better. And one of the big things he just flat out said, I think I can strike out 3 guys before I walk 4.
Right.
Now that's all he was pitching to, man. And which is fine. But then, you're going to, even if you don't walk 4, you maybe walk 2. And then that one pitch that you missed, they hit it for a home run and now you're screwed. And he's avoided that this year. I mean, his strikeout rate is exactly where it's been. It's just, he cut the walks in half, just out of a boom, one mental adjustment, one change in his approach, walks cut in half. That's huge. I mean, that's the difference between a sort of reliable setup man and an all-star closer.
So here's one of the takeaways for me about Matt Barnes in the first half of the season. The Ohtani home run that allowed the Angels to beat the Red Sox for the one game, I think, in that weekend series. That was the Ohtani home run off Barnes in the 9th. He didn't crumble. It didn't upset him like it might some guys. And he bounced back very strong, like I believe in the next several opportunities out of the bullpen. And that is just something to me that sticks out about a guy like Matt Barnes, because if you're going to be a closer, if you're going to be at the back end of the bullpen, whether it's Barnes with Boston, whether it's San Diego's closer, Mark Melanson, who has been dominant, actually baseball's best in the first half. He had a couple of rough outings. Josh Hader just got beat twice by the Reds in the 9th inning, back-to-back games. You've got to have a short memory. And I think Barnes has done a really good job of that.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, you wonder if that experience he had in 19, when they tried to use him as kind of a super reliever, only face the heart of the order over and over again. And that was sort of a sabermetric-y idea that Cora admitted afterward just didn't work. It didn't take the personal side of it into account. You wonder how much he maybe learned from that experience. Did he learn too from the experience of pitching with Kimbrel for a while? I mean, he's seen guys do it, right? And he's been around. I mean, gosh, he's 31 years old. He's been in this market his whole career.
I forget that.
Right. Oh yeah. Old. Yeah. So I think that he's a guy who, he is a first year closer, but he doesn't have that. There's a mentality to him that you don't worry that this is sort of a, will he be able to keep closing? Like, I don't think the 9th inning really bothers him. I mean, he can move on when it goes south pretty easily.
I mean, right. He's a veteran. He's been in that closer role this year for several months now, but still, that moment against Ohtani, that can, devastate a lot of pitchers and frustrate them. And it didn't with him. And that's why I think having him at the back end of the bullpen's certainly been one of the big surprises of 2021, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, again, you can't forget that, not only did we not know if Barnes was going to be able to close, but then, the season started with Josh Taylor and Adam Ottavino, neither one pitching very well. Sawamura was a total unknown. Garrett Whitlock's a Rule 5 kid. I mean, there were plenty of ways that this bullpen could not work. I mean, it had more potential problems than it had solutions, but every solution's shown up. Really, I mean, they've gotten what they've needed, and it started with Barnes taking over that role in the 9th, which has let Cora work backwards, right? When he knows the 9th inning is set, then he can mix and match with those sort of those setup guys and use them the way he wants.
All right. We promised you that I would get back to the moment we teased earlier in the podcast. about Chaim Bloom, the Red Sox president of baseball operations, storing chips, if you will, building up his organization. And this is a great time of the year because I love what MLB has done with the draft, moving it to the Sunday of the All-Star break, at least this year. And on Sunday night, the Red Sox not taking Kumar Rocker, the Vanderbilt starting pitcher with dynamite stuff, instead going with 18-year-old high school shortstop Marcelo Mayer out of Eastlake High School in Chula Vista, California. This, to me, Chad Jennings, is more about taking potential first-round value as an asset as opposed to taking a true need. Your take?
Oh yeah, no, it's certainly not a need-based thing. I mean, yeah, I think it's just looking at this kid he may be the most talented kid in the draft, and there's some risk with every high school kid. They felt like they'd spent a lot of time with him. They sort of they really noticed him when he was a sophomore, so they've been kind of on him for 3 years. And but yeah, for sure, if they wanted to hit for need here, it would have been. I think Rocker would have made some sense. Just get a good college arm, but you also want to take advantage of drafting this high. I mean, when else are they going to pick number 4 in the draft? And this is, right. and Marcelo Mayer is he is a number 4 in the draft talent, right? I mean, now there's risk with all these guys, right. But he's the guy. This guy could be really elite, and I just think that's a hard thing to pass up if it's sitting there.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with it as much, but it's just going to raise the eyebrows of some who say that, any team that wants to compete for a World Series is going to need young, controllable, upper echelon pitching talent. And that's why, to me, especially given Chaim Bloom's reputation of developing elite young pitching, he's very familiar with Vanderbilt, obviously, in the talent that he's had down in Tampa Bay. Not taking Rocker at this point just raised my eyebrows a little bit. That's all.
Sure. And it does seem too that the industry kind of began to value him a little bit differently, right? He was the standout guy and then kind of had an uneven season, and that does seem to change. The way it does seem to have changed their calculation, right? It obviously was not only, he fell to 10, he went to the Mets.
Yes, correct.
And so, it's for a guy who seemed like everybody was going to trip over themselves and tank for Kumar last year and all this stuff. It wasn't just that. It might not just be they're trying to get this, they'd rather have this high end, high school shortstop. It may also be just an evaluation now that's telling them Rocker's maybe not the high end starter that we kind of thought he was.
Right. I mean, we all knew Jack Leiter was going to go
right
3, right? I mean, that was a given going into this draft, and he eventually went second to the Texas Rangers. And pictures were, let's see here, taken. Well, the first picture taken was Jack Leiter. The Pirates didn't go that direction. They went Henry Davis, the catcher out of Louisville, which a lot of people had maybe the Red Sox. I believe you, Chad, when you were doing a preview, you had the Red Sox taking a good hard look at him. If he
yeah. And I felt like that the directions they could go were basically one of the Vanderbilt pitchers, Davis, the catcher, or one of those high school shortstops. And I think what I think would have been curious is if Mayer had gone 3rd and they're left with, would they have gone Kumar Rocker there, or then at that point, would they have done like kind of a below slot thing and tried to spread the money a little bit more? I don't know, because at that point I don't know if there was sort of a standout elite talent. I think just Mayer was too much of a standout to pass up, right? So that I would have been curious to see what happened there, because when Davis went 1, my immediate thought was, oh wow, they may have just lost. That felt like they're if they can't get Leiter, they can at least get Davis, and then that felt like, oh man, this could really go south on them in a hurry.
I was watching some of the coverage, and Dan O'Dowd made the point. I'm here in Cincinnati. My daughter goes to Miami of Ohio. You know where I think I'm going with this. Sam Bachman, the right-hander out of Miami of Ohio, went right before Kumar Rocker, and he was pretty stunned by that, like really stunned. And he said, something doesn't add up to me about the kind of arsenal O'Dowd kept using that word to refer to what Rocker has. He has a much more superior arsenal than Bachman does. And he can reach triple digits. He's got a hammer slider. He's just got a very, very good couple of pitches, but doesn't have the arsenal Rocker has. And he just was stunned that Rocker fell all the way down to 10 to the Mets. Yeah,
I mean, and again, it's hard to the number of things they're trying to take into account, right? Trying to predict, whether these guys can improve and what they have, the evaluations, and also there's a money calculation in all of this. And so, some demands there might have swayed some teams a different direction as well.
You think Marcelo Mayer is going to wind up with the Red Sox when he makes his major league debut?
Maybe he's the guy they trade for the next Mookie Betts, whatever that move is down the road. But I think it's there's so many things with the Red Sox right now with Houck that it's just hard to know exactly what are the next 5 years going to look like. And I think that the easy assumption is like, oh, he's going to hang on to all of them. And yes, of course, like that's the whole point of all these guys but I don't think it's that cut and dry for him. I do think that there is a sense of, players are assets. And,
yes.
and so if by the time he's almost ready, if Mayer's in AAA in whatever 3 years, and they're right on the verge and they've got some guy out there that they can get, I mean, who knows if at that point Houck is going to be in a point where he goes, all right, nope, now this is when I go, right? This is when I'm going to go for it. And we make that move. I just think he talks a lot about wave after wave after wave after wave. And so as much as, that this kid's 18 years old and 4 years away, maybe best case scenario from the big leagues, but he likes that. I mean, he took Nick York last year. In theory, he's got his middle infield for 2025 sitting at the lower levels of the system. And I think he likes that wave aspect of it, that those guys might hit at just the right time when he needs a couple of cheap high-end position players, but they might not. They might come at a time when he needs a trade chip. And I just think we don't know yet we don't know exactly what this long-term vision of Houck is. So I think it makes sense, though. What we're seeing though the way he's arranging the chessboard, right? He is giving himself, there are pieces here, there are pieces here, there are pieces here, there are pieces here, and he's got it set up kind of. You can see him, the Benintendi trade. He got the three players to be named later are all young kids, the long way away. He is setting himself up to be ready for various things that come in the next few years. And so just, I think we're going to have to wait and see exactly how that plays out. Cause we've never seen him and he's never been in a position like that where he's with a team that both has that talent and has money to spend. And so that's going to be the thing to watch.
Red Sox with 55 wins at the All-Star break. We're saying conservatively here with still half a month left in July, August, and September. They ought to win at least 40 more games. That puts them at 95 wins. Mm-hmm. That's good enough to get them into the playoffs, right? I mean, there's no question about that.
Well, I mean, it should be. I think you do, so what, 2 wild card spots? I mean, you do worry, Yankees, Rays, Blue Jays. I mean, that's a dangerous group. And I mean, they certainly are in a position where you have to think they should make the playoffs at this point.
Yeah. I mean, 95 wins should get them there. And I don't see the Yankees or Blue Jays both getting hot at the same time. That's one. 2, mm-hmm. I think Tampa Bay is going to be there. I haven't taken a look at the schedule. I don't know how many more games they have left with Baltimore. They should win pretty much all of them. But, you look at the schedule on the back end, it gets a little bit more difficult, right? Coming out of the All-Star break because they have so many games now coming up with the Yankees and Blue Jays.
Oh, yeah. I think they have, 8 games against the Yankees coming right out of the gate? Is that right?
And they have, I think, 8 against Tampa Bay. They have, in the next 3 weeks, they have 16 games against those 2 teams.
Yeah. I mean, so maybe that's your season, right? I mean,
yeah,
you want to figure out where you're going. If this thing's for real, well, you need to prove it right there. I mean, right out of the gate, right out of the break, they need to play well, and ideally you'd kind of really bury them at that point. But given themselves enough of a cushion where if they've just got to fend them off, right? You really just can't get beat up there. And then you're still sort of in a pretty good position.
Anything else we should be on the lookout for from you or your colleague, Jen McCaffrey at The Athletic?
I mean, I think right now we're at the,
Take a breath.
we're very much in all-star break mode of going, all right, let's regroup here and figure out what we're doing. But yeah, we've started, and we're traveling again now. So that's been good.
That's
and,
great.
Feeling like we can get on the road. Jen's going to go to New York after the break. I'm going to Tampa at the trade deadline. And, so it's starting to feel a little bit more normal again. And then you start to feel like, you can maybe hit the ground running with some things and hopefully, get some traction going again after the break.
I want to thank everybody for downloading today's podcast. Thank our terrific guest, Chad Jennings, covering all things Red Sox for The Athletic. You can follow him on Twitter at Chad Jennings 22. That's all one word, Chad Jennings 22.